Architecture can humanise anything, or most things, in all sorts of different ways. In the City of London, it's absolutely incumbent on architects to consider a relationship between architecture and money, and indeed to see if there is some way of giving it expression. One of the most important people in considering a relationship between money and architecture, particularly in the City of London, is Nicholas Barbon. Barbon is a crucial figure in the history of economics and particularly of property development. Barbon says that human beings have two sets of desires, the desires of the body and the desires of the mind. The desires of the body, he thinks, are pretty straightforward and easily satisfied. The desires of the mind, on the other hand, expand exponentially. As your mind evolves, you have ever more increasing desires. Barbon thinks that buildings and builders should aim to satisfy the desires of the mind, because that's where the real profit lies. I think when you're talking about money, it's very helpful to refer to sociologist Jörg Simmel, who is an expert in the relationship between the role of money and how cities work. Jörg Simmel says that money is too abstract to have a definite relationship to space, but he does suggest that there'll be evolving relationships where architecture, space, spatial framework that makes up a city might have some relationship to money. Simmel argues that we can't do anything about matter and force, they're given. But what we can do, and by implication what architects could do, is transfer matter and force from reality to value. If we transfer something into the realm of values, that takes us to satisfying the desires of the mind rather than the desires of the body, because values come from the mind, whereas physical needs come from the body. I think we can see the ideas that these two thinkers, Simmel and Barbon, use in looking at the realm of desires and values in Eric Parry's building at Finsbury Square, commercial office building finished in 2002. It is a point where you get a complete coalition between a commercial need and a cultural desire.
Finsbury Square is a late Georgian square. The project is half of one side of the square. It is a singular building, a central entrance, an atrium, quite rational, very beautiful, and a simple organization. The idea developed to build a load-bearing facade.
The structure as an exoskeleton, aptly described by a friend as a kind of high-tech Stone Age. This had no precedent.
A very simple elevation. As you move up the building, the amount of structure becomes wider spaced as the structural loads reduce. The facade is logical from an engineering point of view in the way that it opens up as it receives less loading through the top of the building. It also, at the ground, gets thicker so that there's more stone where it needs to have that extra capacity. Very simple, it sounds, but full of extraordinary complexity. That is the lyricism in this project.
It has a very striking facade. It's structural stone, and behind it there is a long, clear span which gives a sort of column-free space that is a basic commercial need for creating value in a city office building.
The interesting thing about this is how to create a kind of civic facade, a facade to a square, not a street. Thing that gives you is a very nice, and I think a very beautiful moment on the corner of the building where these piers of stone twist. to create a tight facade to the back, but let that open up to have depth.
One of the important things about the way that facade works and the way it relates to the interior of the building is that there is a structured sequence from the square, across the street, through the entrance, through the reception, and then looking up into the atrium.
We were confronted with a brief that each floor above ground had to be the same dimension and create an open plan office space that's flexible and very usable.
The architect has some sort of obligation to mitigate the inconvenience that a building may cause, and that's by adding a certain amount of pleasure, delight, intrigue, information, association. And there we're back to Nicholas Barbon and the wants of the mind as opposed to those of the body. By optimizing the structure, it can be made to work in different ways. And it can be made to work in ways which are not necessarily the most simple and straightforward, but in ways that both improve the internal space and give a more significant and more satisfying appearance to the public realm.